Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. It's quite striking that the first miracle Jesus does in the Gospel of Mark is an exorcism. What are we to make of this? I mean, apart from horror movies, most of us don't have much experience with demons or think often about possessions by demonic spirits. I could talk about the many ways we are possessed in our world today, but again, we don't often consider spiritual beings doing this in our world of today. This wasn't true in the times Jesus walked the earth. Nevertheless, you might suppose that Mark including this exorcism as Jesus' first miracle might give it some significance and importance. And you would be right. The fact that Jesus does an exorcism first is a hint that the battle Jesus is engaged in is not only against sin and evil in our realm, but that he's involved in the cosmic struggle with evil from the very beginning. Even more, the point is that in that struggle, Jesus easily wins. Death and the devil are outmatched right from the start. This week we are continuing to look at some unusual happenings recorded in chapters 15 through 18 in the book of Acts. And today we want to consider the story of a slave girl who, in their times, was considered to be possessed by a spirit. First, however, let me catch you up on some events before and after the story of the slave girl. Paul and Silas had come to Philippi to spread the gospel news of Jesus. Especially when they entered a town, they would go to the synagogue and speak about Jesus. Typically, they didn't get a good reception there, and so the next place they went was to the town's well. In those days, it was a woman's job to draw the water for the family's daily needs, and Paul and Silas would meet the woman and begin talking about Jesus again. In this case, one of the women was very receptive, a woman named Lydia, and she even invited Paul and Silas to stay at her house while they were in town. She and her household were baptized. Then, after the story of the slave girl with the spirit, we find a story of Paul and Silas in jail, and there was an earthquake, and the jailer thought that the prisoners had all escaped. In those days, if that happened, the jailer was forced to complete the sentence of all the prisoners, so this jailer began to take his own life rather than to do that. That's when Paul called to him that all the prisoners were still there. The jailer took Paul and Silas into his home. He and his family were baptized, and again, like with Lydia, they shared food together. The food is a real sign of community and union. However, in the middle, between these two stories, we have the odd story of this slave girl. In her case, she had a spirit of divination. In other words, she saw the truth about things in ways other people couldn't. She was privy to the secrets of the spiritual world that were hidden to other people. Well, it happened that as Paul and Silas passed by, it drew her attention. She is in stark contrast to Lydia and to the jailer. She is poor. She is indentured. She is plagued by an evil spirit. But she begins to follow Paul and Silas, continually shouting out, "These men are slaves of the Most High God, who proclaim to you a way of salvation." She may not have had all the advantages of Lydia and the jailer, but she got the message right. Well, this went on for a few days with Paul and Silas talking to people while this girl followed them around, shouting out her words. Finally, her shrieking annoyed Paul so much that he cast the demon out of her. There's something interesting there. Even the enemies of the gospel recognize God. This spirit in her was not of God. Yet the Spirit knew who Paul and Silas were and what their message meant. You see that in the exorcism Jesus does too. Demons recognize him and his power over them. The original Greek in the text of the slave girl is interesting. Our translations call it a spirit of divination, but the Greek words mean snake spirit. The actual word to describe that spirit in Greek is pythonic, like a python. It might be surprising that evil spirits can and do proclaim the salvation of Jesus. Maybe one thing that means is who Jesus is cannot be denied. And the cries of these demons are cries of despair that they have come up against an enemy that cannot be defeated. The cosmic struggle between good and evil is over, and Jesus wins. Maybe the other thing we can say is that mission on the edges can be messy. It doesn't always fit our expectations, but God is still proclaimed. Inspiration comes in unexpected ways. God works in unexpected places. Sometimes in the places and people you least expect. Sometimes even through us. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.